Hi everyone, Happy New Year. I'm just going to warn you that this is not going to be your sexiest podcast episode. um this episode, if you're watching, I present the charts. It's not edited. It's literally live. I have very little to no notes, dates. I really just wanted to provide a general overview of 2026. If you're looking for a more detailed overview of 2026, check out my 2026 year ahead horoscopes. You basically have your own rising sign portal. So for example, if you're a Libra rising, you're going to have your own Libra rising portal. Every month is its own section where each month has your own presentation, going through the transits visually in a simple but stimulating way. And then there is so many additional supplemental material that I've sort of vetted. Some of it's my own, some of it's other astrologers, that can really support those transits and understanding what is going on with more depth if you're interested in information and learning and all of that. I also add a little bit of the human design element of it, how you can really tune into your inner authority, to know what really resonates, what doesn't, to kind of guide you through. And it's really, you get over 2 hours of material just for your rising sign, just for the presentations. And then the additional supplemental material is, endless hours. And I think I go over 60 plus transits for the year. So in this general overview, I only want to discuss what I think are the major trigger points throughout 2026 that are connected. So there's sort of these interesting points throughout 2026 that I want to talk about. In addition to, my monthlies, or if you've purchased the portal, or you want to purchase the 2026 year ahead portal that has so hours and hours and hours of information, that gives such a more detailed view month by month, that this is more of a wide perspective, how are all of these things connected? How can we we zoom in on these transits, but how can we zoom out and gain a wider perspective on what actually is transpiring? In some ways it can help. It can help when we kind of pull out and we see the bird's eye view. So, this is a general overview. It is not conclusive. I want to warn you, it's live. All of my stuff is pretty much live, but this is very, very live. I'm in the midst of holiday season. So a lot of this is just, we're going live. I did blank out the transit on the left side on my software just to prevent confusion if you're watching, so that the dates and the transit on the right, if you're watching, are the transits that I'm actually pulling up. So I just wanted to verify that. I didn't edit it out when I pull up the human design components that I go to in the general overview. So don't let that overwhelm you. But it's a pretty raw, not so edited approach, but I wanted to get this out there for you guys to provide the broad perspective as we go through the monthly horoscopes, where things get more detailed. And certainly if you purchase my 2026 year ahead portal year ahead horoscope, there is 60 plus transits presented to you that go through, plus some supplemental material that I might add more to throughout the year if I feel inspired or I feel very aligned to it. So definitely check that out. The link to purchase that year ahead portal, where it's not a guide, it's not a downloadable guide, it's literally like an online course for your 2026 year ahead horoscope. So there's a lot in there. So definitely check that out. The link is in the description below if you haven't checked that out already. Anyways, again, this is general. I'm not going over every transit. I'm not going over every eclipse. I'm just going over, I think, the major points of 2026 to really pay attention to as we move through the more detailed transits in the monthly horoscopes, etc. So anyways, let's jump in. Hello, Gemini risings. So the first major thing I want to talk about going into 2026 is really the second half of January. As we get into mid-January of 2026, this could be, in my opinion, when things could really heat up around this time. And I say that for a number of reasons, but when we get to about here, so January 16th, but again, I'm trying not to use exact dates for these sort of major points throughout 2026 that are connected, because a lot of times we're going to feel this the days leading up to it, the applying aspect. So I'm going to say a couple days leading up to the 16th, a lot of you might feel this, and then throughout the 16th, the days after. So give or take a couple days either way. Now, excuse me. The thing I want to mention is look at this pile up. I mean, if you're watching, there's a lot in Capricorn, in your 8th house, your Capricorn 8th house of transformation, or those long-term financial goals or partners' resources. So this could be financial, investments, assets, taxes, loans, mortgages, partners' resources, or transformational work that could be coming up around this time or being discussed. This is also tax season, or like tax season starts to kind of ramp up after this. So this could be sort of a time where you're focused on finances for Gemini risings. Either way, the major thing I want to talk about is the personal planets, Mercury, Mars, and Venus, as well as this new moon forming in Capricorn, that will be forming a closing sextile to Saturn in your Pisces 10th house of career, business, public recognition, or what brings you fulfillment. So these personal planets have basically done a full loop around your chart, and now having that closing sextile, that closing opportunistic aspect to the story that's been playing out for a lot of you with career, business, public recognition, or what brings you fulfillment, where I think for a lot of you, maybe the story can start to close out. Sort of like some of you might feel like, man, the past couple years, this is when I'm ready to kind of close that chapter and gear up and initiate into something new, especially when we get into April of this year. So I do think that January is somehow potentially connected to April, which I'll get to, but I want to focus on the closing sextile with Mars. And how this new moon in your Capricorn 8th house, right? New moon, new beginnings, new opportunities. Could be initiating transformational work, could be initiating financial themes, resources, partners' resources if applicable, while you're simultaneously sort of maybe initiating something that you want to unfold over the next 5 or 6 months pertaining to those themes, but also be kind of closing out what has transpired in the past couple years, especially with Mars. The reason why I want to focus on Mars is 1, for time purposes, and 2, Mars is exalted here. So Mars is packing a punch in Capricorn, and Mars in this closing sextile to Saturn around mid-January is, I think, not only closing out the story that got initiated around April of 2024. So some of you might be able to think back to April of 2024, predominantly around career and work themes, just because Mars does rule your 6th house of daily work and health routines. And Saturn's in that 10th house of career, business, public recognition. So for some of you, this could have heavy work, colleague, career, what brings you fulfillment themes. There could be some health and transformational themes for some of you as well in there, but either way, this is sort of closing out that story that potentially got initiated roughly around April of 2024, where a new Mars-Saturn cycle or conjunction will take place in April of 2026, initiating a new 2.5-year cycle to play out. So we're kind of gearing up, like closing things up and tying loose ends, but also there could be some opportunities thrown in there for some of you as well regarding those themes. And I think some of you could be sort of closing out the past 2.5 years by initiating new long-term financial goals. Like some of you might be closing this out and saying, okay, I'm ready to kind of create new investments, new transformational work, new financial goals. And Mars is not only having this closing sextile to Saturn, it is also having the closing trine to Uranus in your Taurus 12th house of subconscious thought patterns, dreams, behind the scenes work, really more of the hidden parts of your chart in this life. And so the trine to Uranus in your 12th is interesting because with Mars ruling your Scorpio 6th house of daily work and or health routines, it also rules your Aries 11th house, friends, groups, communities, and long-term goals, which is going to be very active in April of 2026. So, excuse me, I think there could also be additional flow or dissolving of obstacles to maybe working behind the scenes on something regarding work or health that could be setting the stage for a long-term goal or something regarding your social network, especially as we get closer to April of 2026. So all in all, very generally speaking, I think the second half of January is a very potent time for Gemini risings where you could be sort of closing out stories and closing out this cycle that you've been working with for the past 2.5 years, but also consciously working behind the scenes, especially the 8th and the 12th house. They're adverse houses. They're sort of shadow houses. So it's sort of as if Gemini risings are sort of working behind the scenes, working behind closed doors as to what you're gearing up for in 2026. The next thing I want to talk about, especially before we get to April, is February. The February 17th eclipse in your Aquarius 9th house of growth and potential. What do I mean by growth and potential? I mean spirituality, long distance travel, teaching, publishing. And for some of you, this could be career related. So for some of you, it could be travel for work, could be, increasing your knowledge, spirituality, publishing, teaching, that could be career related or personal, either way, whatever growth and potential you're really seeking in 2026. This new moon solar eclipse at 28 degrees in that Aquarius 9th house of growth and potential, generally speaking, good time to initiate new opportunities, new abilities, new ideas, whatever it is that could be career related, to to unfold over the next 5 or 6 months. What I don't think is being discussed enough is that the ruler of this new moon solar eclipse at 28 degrees in Aquarius is ruled by Saturn. And when this eclipse goes exact, the ruler of this eclipse, Saturn, is 3 days away from being exact by the minute to a conjunction with Neptune at 0 degrees of Aries, which is a critical degree. I don't believe this has ever happened before. Saturn has been conjunct Neptune in Aries before, but not at 0 degrees of Aries. Again, 0 degrees of any cardinal sign is a critical degree. And I think the odds of Saturn being conjunct Neptune at 0 degrees in your Aries 11th house of your dreams, your long-term goals, your aspirations, your social network, ruling, coincidentally, this solar eclipse initiating a new chapter, a new idea, a new opportunity around your growth and potential, which could be career related, is very potent. Now, for Gemini risings, this could be strong, teaching, publishing, travel, career, business, public recognition that has strong social network or long-term goal themes. But Saturn also rules this Capricorn 8th house, where you had that 8th house pile up in January that I just discussed, where a new moon happened there. So it's like all of these things seem to be kind of intricately connected through 2026, where this new moon solar eclipse is just very peculiar, in addition to Mars and Saturn also being in mutual reception. They've swapped homes. Mars rules your daily work and health routines, as well as your long-term goals, and Saturn rules this 9th house of growth and potential or career and public recognition themes if you know your chart and your midheaven is here. So there's really, and I want to point out too, you don't even need to know the astrology, you just need to know this is a very visible area of the chart for Gemini rising. So I think this is when things could start to become more visible and really start to amplify and unfold, particularly around goals, social network, career, growth, potential, etc. So the last thing I want to talk about in terms of this eclipse is adding a little bit of that human design element and how these planets activate certain gates in human design. And let me just get this lined up a little bit better. With the human design, we go to February 17th, with this new moon eclipse, the sun and the moon are conjunct. So we have the sun at gate 30, we have the moon at gate 30. And gate 30, I think, adds a really interesting explanation or layers to what this new moon actually means. Because gate 30 it can have a collective energy of learning how to release our expectations on how experiences are going to turn out, or, how they're going to evolve. And some of us might feel actually more inspired to try new things, especially with a new moon, the new opportunity, the new idea. And for you in this area of growth and potential. And that with gate 30, it's like we really can only use our inner authority or inner compass to know what those new opportunities and new experiences and new ideas we have clarity on or feel aligned to, but that we really don't know how it's going to evolve or turn out. And sort of releasing our expectations and allowing ourselves to just move through that process of what feels most aligned. And for you, it could be knowledge, spirituality, travel, publishing, teaching, really any of those higher mind growth and potential themes that for some of you could be career related. That could also be playing into what is dissolving or surrendering with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in this 11th house around your social network, your long-term goals, to allow maybe more space for those new ideas, new opportunities, etc. So I think it's interesting how the human design component is also indicating this additional layers of this new moon energy, what new experiences or new opportunities could be coming in for you, Gemini rising, where it is playing into growth and potential themes. Could be very much career related, especially with Saturn officially making its way out of your Pisces 10th house, February 20th. And how much you've learned, how much you've strengthened, how much you've grown, how, it's been a journey with that for a lot of you. And how this human design component is really saying, hey, whatever's coming up around this time, what feels right, what feels aligned, and maybe focusing a little bit more on that in the moment instead of how it's supposed to turn out, because maybe it's supposed to turn out better than you could have even imagined. And so just like allowing it to evolve and unfold. Now, getting to April, this is when things, I think, really heat up in 2026. Again, mid-April, I'm going to say the days leading up to April 16th, April 17th, where we have this major pile up here in your Aries 11th house. So if you're not watching, if you're listening, we have Mercury, Neptune, Mars, Saturn, Moon, Sun, Chiron, all lined up in your Aries 11th house of friends, groups, communities, and long-term goals. So there could be a lot of, and Aries is a cardinal sign. It likes to initiate. So there could be a lot of new energy, new ideas, initiating new things around new long-term goals, dreams, aspirations, what's going on with your social network. And I also want to point out that this is also creating new cycles. Well, Mars is creating new cycles, Mercury as well. But again, I'm going to focus on Mars here for time purposes, where Mars had that closing sextile back in January, where now as we get to mid-April, Mars is applying to Neptune, creating a new 2.5 year cycle with Neptune, where we get to around like April 11th, April 12th. So again, still the days leading up to about the 16th, 17th, where Mars is creating a new cycle with Neptune for the next 2.5 years, where this could be a time where maybe you are sort of dissolving, surrendering, releasing whatever doesn't serve sort of the people you want to surround yourselves with. Maybe there's new ways of connecting with others. There's new desires, motivations, a plan of action around what connections are ideal for you with these new cycles that are initiating around this time for many of you. And then Mars, after that, as we get closer to the 16th, the 17th in April, Mars starts to get very close, applying to a conjunction with Saturn, creating a new cycle with Saturn. Where this could be this one's interesting. This new cycle with Saturn in Aries is interesting because this could be creating new 2.5 year cycle with Saturn where you're potentially having new goals, new action, new plan to play out over the next couple years around your growth and potential that could be career related, around your long-term financial goals or transformational work, because that's what Saturn rules in your chart. But I want to remind people, Saturn is reporting to Mars. Actually, all of these planets, Mercury, Neptune, Saturn, Moon, Sun, Chiron, this is Mars. This is Mars's home. They're all visiting the house of Mars. So they're all reporting to Mars. Just like if you owned a house and you had all these guests in your home, it's your home, it's your rules, it's your way. So I look at Mars here as the decision maker. Mars is saying, listen up. This is how we're going to do it. And Saturn is in fall by essential dignity. So Saturn is like in a foreign country. It doesn't speak the language. So I'm actually looking at this Mars-Saturn conjunction as sort of like a foreign exchange student situation where you're visiting someone's home where they live there, that's their country, they speak the language, they know what to do, they know where to go, and you don't. And Saturn is sort of in that position of, okay, well, how do I reestablish the boundaries? What do I want to build? How do I create new ways of disciplining myself and creating longevity around my goals, my social network to create, or with what Saturn rules, sort of how do I create new goals and new structures and systems to support my growth and potential, to support my long-term financial goals or transformational work that might feel foreign. It might feel very new to you. So I think some Gemini risings, you might be stepping into a time of pursuing long-term goals or social network themes in ways that you've never done before, especially with Neptune having made its final ingress into this area as well. So, and Mars, Mars is running the ship here. So Mars is really the decision maker, in my opinion, going through here, initiating the new cycle, saying, this is my plan of action. This is what I want. This is what motivates me. And Saturn is sort of like, okay, well, I don't speak the language and I don't know where to go. So, all right, I gotta find new ways of building. I gotta find new ways of creating structure here. So if it feels a little, the point that I'm trying to make is in April, there's a lot of new energy, a lot of initiating energy, new cycles starting. Things are really starting to kick off for a lot of us potentially, but it could feel new in a way that we haven't experienced before. And I know new means a new way of never experiencing it before, but in a way we truly haven't navigated. It could feel foreign to us, but it could be exciting. It could be new. Now, the thing with Gemini risings is this is still a very visible house in your chart. This is still a very visible area. So a lot of you, this could be happening in very visible ways. You could find yourselves in new territory physically. You could be traveling more. You could be, meeting up with new people, exploring new things, and that's kind of playing into these new cycles. But either way, I want to talk about this new moon that takes place on April 17th. This new moon at 27 degrees will technically be conjunct Chiron at 26 degrees. close enough. I think this is important in the context of the new cycles that are happening with Saturn and Neptune in Aries, because I think it's playing into those new cycles starting. So whatever is initiating, whatever is new, we coincidentally have this new moon, new beginnings, new opportunities, new ideas around your friends, groups, communities, long-term goals. That's conjunct Chiron. So I think some of us might be really ready for this. Some of us might be ready to sort of release those old patterns, release those old ways of being that don't support the long-term goals anymore, the people you want to surround yourselves with. And then some of us might feel a little off about it. But when I looked at the human design component of this and what gate this new moon and Chiron will be at, it got a lot more interesting, because the new moon on April 17th, right? Sun and moon conjunct. So sun will be at gate 3, moon will be at gate 3, and theoretically Chiron at gate 3. Gate 3 in human design, which I think we could also see a lot, very much collectively. Again, it depends on your human design chart, but I'm not going to get into that. Gate 3 is about structure and innovation to move away from chaos. So I think on one end, certainly collectively, this new moon could provide innovative solutions and new paths. And for you, Gemini risings, around your social network, your long-term goals, your dreams, your aspirations. But some of us might feel that Chiron effect with gate 3 regarding the fear of getting it wrong or looking messy through the newness, or perhaps struggling with the experimentation process regarding the new goal, or meeting new people, or surrounding yourself with new people. But I think April is a good time to remind ourselves that these things take time, and to give ourselves some time and some grace to work through these cycles, work through the process, and that through the experimentation, through the innovation, we find new ways, we find new paths that eventually do work. So I think it's interesting how the human design is also indicating what the astrology is somewhat indicating around, yes, it's a new moon, a new beginning, a new opportunity in Aries, where we can really initiate with these new cycles also initiating in Aries. A lot is initiating in fire and air in 2026 compared to earth and water in the previous years. And that's a huge distinction, especially for Gemini risings, because you are an air sign. So in some ways, it's kind of like a little bit more compatible with you, but it might feel weird. It might feel foreign. It might, adjusting to the new path or the innovative solutions around your long-term goals, around your social network, around this time, that could be playing into your career, your business, your public recognition, or those growth and potential themes that I previously discussed, you could feel like you're in a little bit of an experimentation phase, and that's okay. So again, April is a very interesting time of new cycles. But it could also be the beginning of breaking free from old patterns or wounds that don't support the new cycle for you Gemini risings around, your work, your long-term goals, your social network, and also any long-term financial goals with Saturn ruling that 8th house as well. Now, moving on to July. July is the next part of the year that jumps out at me. July, again, mid-July, why things are happening in the middle of the month in 2026, I don't know. But mid-July, things start to really get stimulated. Now, I will say, if you're a bit more sensitive, you might feel this going into July. But July 18th, 19th, I think it's the 18th, is when we have this Uranus at 4 degrees in your Gemini first house of the self, the physical body, how you show up in the world. Trine Pluto at 4 degrees in your Aquarius 9th house of growth and potential, which could also be career related, is pretty much exact. So this trine, I think you're going to feel on and off. All of us are going to feel it on and off throughout 2026 and onward. But the fact that it is technically exact in July, around July 18th, I think it could add some more potency to it. The zoomed out perspective on mid-July, around July 18th, 19th, I think predominantly the days leading up to it, a lot of us will feel it. The zoomed out perspective, I just want to point out. Pluto at 4 degrees Aquarius. Neptune at 4 degrees Aries. Uranus at 4 degrees Gemini. Jupiter at 4 degrees Leo. It's a lot of 4. So if you have any planets at 4 degrees in your natal chart, this could be extremely activating and creating more intensity to these planets and what they're doing, or it could also be playing additional midpoints and sort of helping merge the energy of neighboring planets. Again, too complicated to get into for this podcast episode, but the thing I want to point out and break down is this Jupiter-Pluto opposition. So Jupiter had just recently entered your Leo 3rd house of communication, which could be personal or professional, technology, personal or professional. Also, siblings, extended family, really those people, places, and things within your everyday immediate environment. Where Jupiter is starting to, I think, expand your communication, technology, relationships with siblings, extended family, short distance travel. But it's in opposition with Pluto around this time, where Pluto is in your Aquarius 9th house of growth and potential. So oppositions can be very challenging because it can quite literally feel like we have to be in 2 different places at once or doing 2 completely different things at once. And it can be challenging. It can be even disorienting for some people. Now, you might feel like you really want to focus on the expansion of your immediate environment, your communication, technology, siblings, extended family. But then you also might feel like you really want to focus on the empowerment and transformation regarding your growth and potential. Maybe you really want to travel, learn things. It could be career related. So you could feel this tug of war between the 3rd and the 9th, or things could get really busy as well. However, yes, this is an opposition. But another thing I want to mention that's going on in the background is that Neptune and Uranus are making supportive aspects to Pluto and Jupiter in opposition. So when you have 2 planets in opposition, yes, it can be challenging to balance these energies, especially with Jupiter and Pluto, which can create power struggles as well. But if you have planets in the background that are creating sextiles and trines to the planets in opposition, they have support. They have supporting players to help balance the opposition. So we have Neptune in your Aries 11th house of friends, groups, communities, and long-term goals, sextile that Pluto in that 9th house of growth and potential. So some of you, generally speaking, without even involving any aspects, Pluto-Neptune connections can be a bit supernatural, can be very intuitive, supernatural, sort of mystical. And, with Neptune in your 11th of social network and long-term goals, sextile Pluto in that 9th house of growth and potential, you could have sort of like ideal moments or really interesting connections with your social network or anything regarding your long-term goals that help create some potential opportunity to the empowerment or transformation you might feel pulled towards regarding your growth and potential themes. That could be career related. So again, like Neptune could be helping you focus on the compassion and the ideal social network or long-term goals that can help put things into sort of like a cerebral perspective around what you truly want with your growth and potential. Additionally, Neptune in your Aries 11th house of social network and long-term goals will be making a supportive trine to Jupiter in your Leo 3rd house of communication, siblings, extended family, short distance travel. So Jupiter-Neptune can be really dreamy, artistic, creative. So especially with Jupiter-Neptune trine in fire between your 3rd and your 11th, this could be really creating some like really dreamy, intuitive, interesting connections or communication or conversation with a social network. If you work with 3rd house themes of like technology or communication, personally or professionally, this could create a really creative flow or flair to those themes around this time that could be helping you sort of simultaneously support that expansion that you want to take in the communication, technology, siblings, extended family. So this could sort of expand communication personally or professionally to support your creativity with communication or technology, or just create some really interesting connections and communication that feels creative and expansive and even mystical with, friends, groups, communities that play into maybe dreaming up those goals, those dreams, those aspirations that could be really supportive to this Jupiter wanting to sort of expand your communication, really your immediate environment and things within your immediate environment. And then Uranus, which I already touched on, the Uranus-Pluto trine. Uranus is wanting to innovate you, wanting to innovate how you show up in the world, your physical body, identity, and that can really simultaneously create flow to the empowerment and transformation you want to pursue with growth and potential themes. That again could be career related. But this Uranus is also making a supportive sextile aspect to Jupiter in this Jupiter-Pluto opposition. And it's sort of like Uranus is allowing you to step into more innovative ways of being and existing in the world that can create opportunity to expanding your communication, technology, personally or professionally, even expanding those connections, siblings, extended family, your neighborhood, short distance travel, expanding that in those 3rd house themes. So being able to sort of innovate, step into new ways of existing, new ways of being that feel not radical, but just like being able to sort of stimulate different parts of yourself and integrate them can simultaneously create opportunities to communicate with the world in new ways that can then create sort of this domino effect of expanding your everyday world. So the way I look at it is Uranus and Neptune are kind of in the background, right? Uranus in your first house of self, Neptune in the 11th house of friends, groups, communities, and long-term goals. Creating these sextiles and trines to this Jupiter-Pluto opposition, basically saying, hey, there's things going on in the background where maybe if we focus a little bit on you, your identity, yourself, how you want to innovate, how you want to sort of move through the world in new innovative ways, that can really help support Jupiter going on in the background in this opposition. And, you know, Neptune is also there saying, hey, what's going on with your social network? What connections do you have? What dreams, aspirations can also support your communication and technology personally or professionally, or things within your everyday immediate environment. But that can also support and create potential opportunities to take with the empowerment and transformation you want with your knowledge, your spirituality, travel opportunities, publishing, teaching. Again, it could be all career related around this time. So July looks very, very stimulating. Again, a lot of things happening at 4 degrees. And then when we continue on to August, I think it's August 28th. Yes. So August 28th, we have this full moon at 4 degrees in Pisces. Again, 4 degrees. The sun and the moon at this 4-degree mark. So again, is this full moon lunar eclipse that is really culminating something, illuminating something, or closing something out with your career, your business, your public recognition, or what brings you fulfillment, connected to all those 4-degree marks in July? And this full moon lunar eclipse, again, generally speaking, we're trying to keep a bird's eye view here in this podcast episode, but this full moon lunar eclipse is definitely highlighting your career or what brings you fulfillment versus your home and family life around this time. So a lot of you could see a lot of things highlighted, especially with this being in angular houses, giving way to potentially a lot of change. But in particular, this full moon lunar eclipse is square Uranus in your Gemini first house of the self, the physical body. So I think once we get deeper into August, even into the beginning of September, this eclipse looks this eclipse looks like an opportunity for a lot to change and a lot to happen. So, and why I say that is because Uranus is basically in a T-square. So it's getting 2 squares. It's getting a square from this full moon lunar eclipse, and it's getting a square from the sun and also Mercury, an exalted Mercury, very powerful Mercury here, even though it's combust. So there's a lot happening. It's sort of like July seems to be this, okay, things are at the, everything at the 4-degree mark, making sextiles, trine, the Jupiter-Pluto opposition, and then all of a sudden we get deeper into August and boom, another 4-degree eclipse at that 4-degree mark, and the T-square. I think for Gemini risings, you could feel this personally because Uranus is in this T-square in your first house of self and physical body. You personally could physically feel the need to take action with the squares happening around this time. Taking action around a home and family matter, property, real estate matter, or career or what brings you fulfillment situation that's going on around this time. Now, the other thing I want to discuss about this eclipse that I think is very important, that's probably overlooked, is Mars in your Cancer second house of earned income and self-worth will be forming its opening square to Saturn. So think back to April of 2026 when Mars was conjunct Saturn, creating a new 2.5 year story to play out. Well, this is the first opening square to that initiating cycle back in April to say, all right, what action are we going to take? What are we going to do? But I want to point out, when Mars initiated this cycle with Saturn, Mars was home. Mars was in rulership. Remember, everyone back in April was reporting back to Mars. This time, when Mars forms the opening square to say, okay, what action are we going to take based off of what started to unfold for a lot of us back in April of 2026, Mars is in fall now. So both Mars and Saturn in this opening square during this eclipse are in fall. They're both in foreign countries and don't speak the language. So the way we take action around this time, and for you, this could be around your finances and your long-term goals or your long-term financial goals, could feel very new, could feel like territory you haven't totally explored. It could feel foreign to you. In the meantime, the square to Uranus in your first is in a Mercury-ruled area, and Mercury is exalted, involved in this eclipse. It's conjunct the sun here. It's actually combust, even though it's exalted. So with what's unfolding and the action being taken around this time, what's beginning, what's ending, I think the areas to look out for that have sort of like where the result will land, potentially, again, it's eclipse season with all these other things going on, is Mercury ruled areas. So I think some of you could see really potential radical changes to your appearance, how you show up in the world, who you are, how you take independent action, and or you could see changes to renovations, relocations, property, real estate, home, family situations, with what is sort of shifting and changing around this time. I also want to point out, additionally, in the background of this full moon lunar eclipse, this full moon lunar eclipse in your 10th house of career and public recognition, or what brings you fulfillment, is ruled by Jupiter. And Jupiter will be forming a trine to Saturn. So there is this interesting constructive expansion going on in the background. So I think maybe some of you are taking action around, it could involve your work or your career, but I think some of you could be really focused on taking action in new ways or unfamiliar ways around financial planning, again, work, even health with Mars. But I think there could be a lot of whatever's happening, whatever's unfolding, there could be a lot of constructive growth or opportunities for constructive growth regarding your career, your business, your public recognition, or long-term financial goals and themes, or both. So I think a lot is culminating in this 10th house of career and public recognition, also involving this 4th house of home and family. But this square to Uranus in your first is creating opportunity for a lot of action and change. Mars opening square to Saturn that initiated back in April of 2026 around your long-term goals and your social network, now involving your earned income, your self-worth, taking action in ways that maybe feel very unfamiliar to you or new to you. But all in all, could create sort of opportunities to make a lasting change to the foundation of your life, the foundation that's going to support you, but also seeing hopefully a lot of constructive growth with the Jupiter-Saturn trine involving your third house of communication, exchanging information, and your 11th house of friends, groups, communities, and long-term goals. But with Jupiter ruling that 10th house, ruling the eclipse, whatever's culminating or going on very visibly in your life, with Jupiter ruling that eclipse in the trine to Saturn, there could be some constructive outlets going on in the background. So again, I could talk a lot more about this, but I think this is so July going into August is another major point in 2026 where things start to transpire and happen. I want to close out the year with the next major point as we get into the fall of 2026. And I'm going to start around the lead up to, I'm going to get this a little bit more exact if you're watching. Close enough. So around mid-November. So November 12th, 13th, 14th, Mars will be passing over the South Node at 25 degrees in your Leo third house of communication, technology, exchanging information, siblings, extended family, short distance travel, etc., etc. So Jupiter will also be at 25 degrees. So Jupiter, Mars, South Node, all at 25 degrees in Leo. So one thing I want to point out about this is that Mars going over the South Node in Leo, Mars rules that 11th house of social network and long-term goals. So it could be going over the South Node, pulling you back to previous long-term goals, previous people in your social network that could be playing into a plan of action or goal, or releasing something that no longer serves your long-term goal or your social network and being able to sort of communicate that. Mars also rules your Scorpio 6th house of daily work and health routines. So some of you could be coming back to your health, could be coming back to a work situation, or could be releasing something that doesn't serve your work or your health. Either way, the overarching sort of perspective that I want to point out here is that Venus and Mercury have just, as we get into mid-November, have recently come off of a retrograde through Scorpio. So both Venus and Mercury have retrograded through Scorpio recently, which is a Mars-ruled area. Then they station direct, and around Mars 14th, Mars goes over the South Node, pulling you back or releasing something after those two retrograded a Mars-ruled area. So this could be playing into that recent Venus-Mercury retrograde, where you can now release after reviewing or revising something over the past month or two. The other thing that's interesting about this is that Jupiter rules your 10th house of career, business, public recognition, what brings you fulfillment. And Mars rules your 6th house of daily work as well. So both your work and career planets are conjunct the South Node. So you could be pulled back to something regarding your work, your career, or you could be releasing a project or releasing something that no longer serves sort of the overall direction you want to take with your career, your business, your work, what brings you fulfillment around this time as well for Gemini risings. This one's very interesting, especially after Mercury and Venus went retrograde through that review and revise process. So maybe you were reviewing and revising something, and then now you're ready to kind of release it or come back to it after perfecting it or realizing what no longer serves or what you want to focus on moving forward. So either way, this Mars-Jupiter conjunction with the South Node in your third house is, I think, for a lot of Gemini risings who are actively in a career or working, could be a very interesting time around your work, your career, and what brings you fulfillment. Now, the other thing I want to talk about with that South Node is that both Mars and Jupiter are going to go retrograde and come back to this 25-degree mark. So again, theoretically, whatever's coming up around this time, you could be coming back to it after a very strong revisionary period, especially with Mars. So Mars is going to retrograde back to the 25-degree territory in Leo starting on March 4th, 2027. And Jupiter is going to retrograde back to this 25-degree territory around January 8th, 2027. So again, stay open to what could come back around, what perspectives could change, especially around work, career. If it's not work and career, it could be personal or professional partnership connections with Jupiter ruling that seventh house, as well as social network or long-term goals as well. So when I looked at the human design component of this with Jupiter, Mars, and the South Node at 25 degrees, to gain a little bit of a different perspective or additional layers on it. So I pull up November 14th. We have Mars at gate 29, Jupiter at gate 29, and South Node at gate 29. So with this happening at gate 29, I think, is about committing to a process. So with it conjunct the South Node, perhaps this is a time of coming back to or releasing something in order to commit to a process regarding your career, your work, your health, and long-term goals. So any of those themes are kind of on the table with rulerships, but this could also be connected to personal and professional partnerships. So with Mars, it could be releasing or coming back to commit to a process regarding a long-term goal, regarding your work or a health goal. With Jupiter at this gate 29, it could be about coming back to or releasing something to commit to a process regarding those Jupiter-ruled areas, such as your Pisces 10th house of career, or what brings you fulfillment, or your 7th house of marriage or personal or professional partnerships. What connections do you want to make? What connections do you have that are playing a part in this process for some of you? So I want to remind everyone, these two planets, again, they're going to retrograde back to this 25-degree mark, which is going to be at that gate 29 about committing to a process. So I think going into 2027, reminding you that, especially with Mars is going to initiate its retrograde cycle in your Virgo 4th house of home, family, property, and real estate. So there could be an added element of what foundation, what relationships with family, renovations, property, real estate themes. What is really supporting you foundationally in order for you to commit to a new goal or a new process going into 2027? Either way, I think with gate 29, I think I'll leave you with this as we sort of close out 2026 going into 2027 with gearing up for that major Mars retrograde, the South Node business, and it being at gate 29, being aware of what you are saying yes to or committing to, and if it's really in alignment with your inner authority, your inner knowing. So whether for you with planetary rulership, maybe it's a career situation, being aware of what you're saying yes to, what you're committing to, and allowing yourself the space and the time over the coming months going into 2027 to review and revise what is fully in alignment. Perhaps it's a long-term goal, social network, or a partnership situation where, maybe other connections or people are involved in this process or goal, and giving yourself the space and the time to openly communicate and review and revise what is in full alignment. So I think going into 2027, with what's going on at the end of 2026, for Gemini risings, this could be a really great time to gear up to take a step back and see what you were really saying yes to, what you were really committing to, that feels in full alignment to your core motivations, desires, and plan of action in 2027.